Thank you very much, Minister, for being here today. And I share the disappointment of Sinn Féin colleagues that the Cabinet Minister, the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, isn't here. No disrespect to the Ministers of State who are here today. I think it's incredible that he's not here, but it's more incredible the fact that we've had a number of Cabinet meetings this week, and that I don't think is a good image that this government in its early days has portrayed. A government that's having so many meetings in such a short time is a government that's seriously under pressure. Minister, today we'll see the belated July stimulus being announced after the government spent the last 3 weeks inventing its very own mini July stimulus for itself. We now have near record 20 junior ministers, a number that hasn't been seen since the Bertie Ahern and Charlie McCreevy days. We have 17 soon-to-be special advisers about to be appointed to work with the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach and the Green Party leader, the Minister for Climate Action. And now yesterday, of course, as has been placed on the record, we have a situation where three super junior ministers will receive an additional €16,000 in allowances. I'm old enough to remember when 2 would do. This is a very anxious time for families and for businesses, but there is absolutely no sign whatsoever of this government tightening its belt and acknowledging that and understanding the pain and the difficulty a lot of people in this country find themselves in. This approach is absolutely tone deaf to the day-to-day needs of families across the country. You know, they say a good start is half the battle, but I think most people across this country are watching the first few weeks of this government, observing the behaviour of this government behind their hands and behind the couch. It is such a car crash. And Minister, of course, much of what's in this document today is actually historic, so in many ways going through these revised estimates is almost pointless. It's no way to present the estimates. They're quite opaque, they lack in detail, and we have no real idea how much of this money has been spent in granular detail, and neither do we have this sort of sufficient time that we need, I think, to forensically examine expenditure, which is unfortunate to say the least. But today we'll get the first glimpse of the economic trajectory and the economic philosophy behind this government. And unfortunately, I get a sense from what we have learned from the newspapers and media reports in recent days that in many respects it's going to be a case of meet the new government, same as the old government, only with a small change of emphasis. If I can ask both ministers a number of questions that relate to the estimates. What lessons have been learned, for example, from the overspend in terms of the Children's Hospital debacle? We know that the Construction Works Management Framework has been established. That's going to be an important body to manage an enormous amount of public expenditure over the next number of years in the context of the Ireland 2040 plan. We need to make sure that we get value for money and that we ensure that cost overruns are managed properly, transparently and accountably. Can the Minister with responsibility for the OPW advise which OPW sites have been most impacted in terms of fall-off in admission, revenue this year? Clearly, the figures there are worrying, very concerning, and I'd like the Minister to comment on that. Could he also, in terms of programme B5, make comment on what sites and buildings the OPW intend to purchase this year? And furthermore, are any current leases being reviewed? Given the number of public and civil servants who are working from home, and that should be the new normal and they should be supported to do that, and the public service should lead by example, are any expensive leases being reviewed in terms of cost-saving measures for the state? You had mentioned in response to our Sinn Féin colleagues' question in relation to the comparatively high increase, 60% increase in expenditure on the allocation to the Secret Service, that there was convention in this House that that is passed on the nod. Clearly that's a secret, and I think we have to accept that. Again, just on the SEUPB, has any progress been made in relation to progressing the Narrow Water Bridge initiative between North County Louth and South County Down? And there is a programme for government commitment in relation to transitioning the national minimum wage to a real living wage. And a good place to start is to make sure that the Department for Public Expenditure and Reform take responsibility for ensuring that all public and civil servants receive the hourly rate of the minimum wage in terms of their salary. There are several thousand that don't, and I'd like the ministers to elaborate on plans that DPER may have, and the plans that you may have, to progress this initiative through the public service, because the state must lead by example. You might, if you get the opportunity, outline the Department's commitments, and you as a new group of ministers, your commitments in terms of the reform agenda, particularly around political reform, because I think that agenda has been let slide since 2016, to be frank, and that is concerning. Government must happen transparently and accountably. There are things that we need to do in this country that we're not doing, and some of the behaviour in this House over recent days in terms of the reduction of the number of people who can attend committees and be members of committees, and issues around speaking time and so on, is, I think, a flagrant abuse of this chamber, a flagrant abuse of our rights as deputies, and that needs to be protected. So I want to hear from you in terms of the political reform agenda. And just 2 or 3 final points, if I may. I do want to give ministers the opportunity to respond. One final point, if I may. There's been a long-running open sore in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform around the pension rights of community employment supervisors. There's a 2007 Labour Code recommendation and a forum established by the Minister in the Department from 2011 to 2016, Brendan Howland, has essentially been ignored over the last couple of years and bypassed by the Department, it seems to me. So can you give any clarity in terms of the provision of pensions and redundancy payments, if the need arises, for community employment supervisors going forward?
I'm going to talk to Anish and Tara Smith.
Chair. Deputy Nash asks about any new financial controls that may have been put in place or reforms to do with, and he references the National Children's Hospital, and he's absolutely right to ask that question. The National Children's Hospital did suffer from gross overspend. We have a large number of large capital projects planned, and by large I mean those over €100 million in the National Development Plan, and I have no wish to see a second Children's Hospital event take place. And so, with that in mind, there was a report by PwC last year into what went wrong with the Children's Hospital, and that made very specific recommendations about reforms to be made. And included in those was that the governance had to be improved, that the risk sharing had to be improved, that there had to be better analysis. But specifically, they also said that the system whereby the contracting body was also the body that monitored projects wasn't good enough, that whoever commissions a huge project over €100 million can't be the person who also is responsible for keeping track of whether the project is on track or not. And so to answer that, there has to be some independent outside external review all the way through of the cost of these projects, and that unit is the IPPO, which is within the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, and they will be reviewing and providing ongoing control of costs on major capital projects. Thank you.